Hey folks, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about chance of success. The following video is for educational purposes only. ProjectionLab does not give off or render financial, tax, or legal advice. You'll find the chance of success feature right here at the top, so let's go there now. If we expand this first section, we'll see data sources, and by default, these will select historic S&P 500. This is the data set that will be used for backtesting against historical returns. You also have the option to use normal distributions. So let's talk about those differences. Using the historical data set, you will notice here that this is S&P 500. It's also using U.S. inflation rate and a mix of U.S. bonds, government and corporate bonds. The methodology in the next section, we'll see here, by default, this will probably show historical looping. This is one of the simpler sampling methods to use. So this will literally run a trial for every year in the historical data set, but if it runs out of data, it will loop back to the beginning of the data set. So depending on how many years you have left in your plan, you will, this will use a greater amount of looping in the given trials. So let's go ahead and run this, and we'll see what that looks like. So in every case, you should see the same number of trials here, the 96 trials if you use this mode. And we see a 92.7% success rate. So we have 3 trials that sort of almost made it but did not, and then another 4 trials that failed in the middle. The first section of the results page, you'll have a plot to select. So I believe by default, usually this may be showing net worth. So you can switch this to show net worth, total expenses, or withdrawal rate. If you're looking at net worth, you'll see this graph that shows you sort of the top 25%, median, bottom 25, and bottom 10%. And then over here, you're seeing the breakdown. Again, using this year selector here, you're showing the same information that this graph shows, but broken down in more detail here in this bar chart. So you're getting the number of trials here on the y-axis, and the distribution of net worth on the x-axis. So you'll see the bankrupt cases, and then you'll see the sort of the distribution of net worth across the rest of the trials. And if you want, you can, of course, see expenses as well the same way, and withdrawal rate. And before we dive into the more detailed metrics here and trial information, we're going to adjust the sampling method to generate a little bit more data. So let's go ahead and use random start year, random restart, and we're going to run 2,000 trials. So we have a slightly higher success rate in this sampling method. We're using a lot more trials. We do see some results in the barely made it category appear. This is just defined, and you can modify this. So this is legacy net worth less than 50% at retirement. And if you click the category, it will open up the edit page. And as you can see, most of these are customizable. And you'll find these under outcome categories. So now if we scroll down to the section below, we'll see the stats section. Here you can again select the one of the 3 stats that we're modeling for, and then you can select a milestone, and you will get a readout here that says, in the given trials, what the median, average standard deviation, et cetera, was for that metric. At a given milestone. And this can be useful, for example, we see here that at Jordan's, and they have the same retirement date, so that in this case these should be the same. So we can use either one. So Ashley's median net worth, or their combined net worth at retirement, and it was $3 million, and then the average was about the same, and with standard deviation. And then in comparison, you have a net worth at life expectancy. So this is end of the plan is another way to say that. Basically, you get the same data represented up here in tabular form, but at specific milestones. If you have other milestones here, you could see the results for those numbers. In this case, we haven't added many, but we will add another one here in a little bit. And then further down, we get to see sort of the average or the median and the distribution of ages when given milestones were met. This can be helpful when looking at outcome scenarios. So specifically, we're going to look at some of the failed trials and see if there's any correlation there to age of retirement. And if you prefer, you can display this by the age of either member of the plan or year. In our case, since Ashley and Jordan are the same age, there would be no difference here, but the year might be useful for us. So let's look at the actual trials. So let's switch to card view. I like that for this in a lot of cases. So we'll be getting each start year roughly 10 to 20 times, and then added on top of that, though, there's a random restart random restart that could happen in the sampling. So we'll go ahead and look at some of these 89 trials that seem to pop up here. And let's switch this to net worth. So what you see here is the net worth over this trial from 1989 to 2023. So because this is a trial that fails, you're not going to see any sampling happening after 2023. So we can now kind of look at how the plan performed, mapped over historical data, so the historical year. In this case, they our couple here was unfortunate, and they actually retired at age 40, or hit financial independence at age 40, retired the next year. If we scroll down here, you see their age. So that means they actually retired in the year 2000, and then subsequently had very bad investment returns. And they had good bond returns that year. But then we look through more, and we see their investment returns are still consistently bad. And then there's a bit of a rebound, obviously, after the tech bubble, and then some slight recovery, but then getting hit with another negative 38% in 2008, etc. Sort of more ups and downs throughout the way, and then we have obviously some negative bond returns here as well. I believe in our case too, we have a glide path, so they'd be more heavily invested in bonds as we're going. So these negative bond returns are a little more impactful over time, etc. And then we see here, as we're going through, the withdrawal rate, looks good early on. Or sorry, this is the withdrawal rate when they're still working, obviously, so they're not withdrawing anything, and then they hit retirement. And we can see here withdrawal rates exceeding typical thresholds of what we'd expect early in retirement, especially for a very long retirement of about 50 years, where we would typically need to start and remain below 4% in most years. The trend continues to scale up very rapidly, so this tells us that we're using an unsustainable level of withdrawal, and it's not surprising, I guess, that we came to this end. So that's not to say that obviously this is how the plan would necessarily play out in practice. If someone were experiencing this level of withdrawal rate and was tuned into this, most likely what this really tells you is this is a scenario where you will have to make some changes, right? But obviously the purpose of the trial simulation is just to show you how things would play out if you stuck to the plan and ran it out to its end. So that's how that works. So that's interesting. So unsurprising, we have a couple. If things were to play out exactly like from 1989, as if that were today, and they had really, really good returns through the 90s, and said, "Oh, great, we're able to retire now because our this metric was met," right? This would be a scenario where, the bad sequence of returns, is definitely a thing to be aware of and to consider when you're making your plans. Next, let's take a look at one of the trials that resulted in a comfortable outcome. So we see here in the distribution, about 21% of the trials were in this category. So we scroll down here, we can sort Actually, we can just go ahead and pick the first one that appears. So trial number 3. And we note right away that the net worth, obviously they started, so 2004, so after the dot-com bubble until 2023, and then sort of repeating actually a similar pattern, 2008 to 2023, and then kind of looping back to 57 to 86. So that was the sort of random sampling that occurred here. So obviously the sampling is different. One thing that does jump out right away to me, though, is that our retirement date is actually significantly later. So in this case, retiring at 46 as opposed to 41. So you may ask yourself, well, how do we reduce our chance of those failure conditions? Like, what would it take in this model, in this using the sampling that we're using, to eliminate those failure cases? Well, the simple thing you might be able to do here is just increase the net worth metric used to base financial independence on, which is then in turn being used for retirement. So if we go ahead and bump this up, say let's take it to 32. Quick side note here. Throughout the rest of the video, I will cover various ways to increase success rate, but by no means do we recommend everyone should strive for a 100% success rate. Your personal risk tolerance should drive your preferences. And then we can actually now quickly just rerun. So that's one handy thing about milestones. If you can make changes to them quickly and then rerun your plan. And if we look at 32, 32x, we're going to be pretty close. You can kind of look into that one if that one's a particularly unlucky set of circumstances or what. In this case, we probably want to go ahead and just sort the table by result, and then we can open up that trial. And again, we're seeing that 88, 89 period, and then adding on basically another very bad sequence from the mid late 60s, and maybe unsurprisingly, given those sequences that we just barely. Actually, I guess in this case, it looks like it effectively ran out of money in the very last year, maybe just slightly before bankruptcy. Although we also have a note here that says we have remaining equity in non-liquid assets. So technically, this is another indicator here that if you want, you could go to plan and probably adjust your house to be, if you had the house set, because we actually never configured the house to sell. So you could turn on liquidate if necessary. Before we continue to look at chance of success, one quick side note. When you decide to liquidate your primary residence if necessary, you will likely want to add a rental expense that activates automatically in the event your home is sold. So as long as your primary residence is marked as live here, any rental expense you create under expenses will activate automatically. So in our example, we will assume if the home is sold, that we will rent for $2,500 a month. So we can add that expense here now, $2,500. And basically, this can run from now for life, but it won't be added to our expenses as long as we own a home that again is marked as live here. All right, so let's get back to chance of success and see how liquidating will affect our outcome. This is just currently looking at the previous trial, so we'll go ahead and rerun that. And I think we might get 100% with that change. Yeah. We do still have some barely made it trials, which could be still a concern for you, so you could continue to dive into those trial data. And then, you can again tweak this again if you want to see kind of maybe how low you can bring that number down while still kind of maintaining close to 100%. That was enough to kind of tip it a little bit. And, you can continue this work until you kind of are satisfied with use this to sort of tweak your milestone metrics. This can be a helpful way to go about it. Now, on the sort of the more optimistic side, you might be asking yourself, well, what do I do? What can I do in these trials where I have these large surpluses, or even just the comfortable surplus, what can we do to sort of maximize enjoyment of that money? And what we can do is we can use, I've actually have this milestone here disabled, so I'm going to go ahead and show you that. So if we go to milestones, we see here, this is a big surplus milestone, and you can define, this is just a name that I gave it. So I'm going to go ahead and reactivate that. So basically what this is it's a multi-factor milestone, and we have a net worth component. Actually, if we want, we can go ahead and just make that liquid net worth. And we also have this milestone. So it's composed of that, plus it's at least 5 years after retirement. And I've set this for both. This is sort of just a defensive practice in case you end up changing the criteria for either of these retirement dates. It'll always, I just wanted this to always be 5 years after both Ashley and Jordan have retired. So this in and of itself will just create a milestone on the graph, and you'll also now see that under chance of success. So if we rerun, you'll get some stats about the median and average likelihood or age at which this milestone happens. So you've got the occurrence rate. So 97% of the time it happens eventually, but you can see here the age range is quite significant. So, and in some cases, 2.3% of the time it doesn't happen at all. So, but in the times that it does happen, perhaps you want to do something with that information, right? You want to plan some additional spending. So the way you can do that is we'll go to expenses, and we have this bonus. Actually, I guess I already left it on. So actually, that was already in the modeling. So that's good. So we have this bonification, and you start it at the milestone. And in this case, I just wanted it to be bonification we take every year, from the point that the milestone is reached until 10 years before life expectancy. So that's what that's signifying there, the -10. And you could use any time you want and time frame you like, and you can, of course, like every other expense, you can set the change over time if you want. This will be good for us. So what this tells you is and so in the plan now we've introduced this extra spending that only is optional. It's only going to occur when this milestone is met. Now, in your plan view, this will be fairly static. Other things that you change could alter when this happens, but given that the rates of return are constant, this will more or less be fixed unless you change other things that alter your net worth. But under chance of success, it actually happens in the trial data at different times. So let's look at how this affects our total expenses. So now, if you recall, there were significantly more trials here with higher expenses. So what this effectively does is push the number of. Actually, we're going to go ahead and set this back as well to 26, so we can get a few more failure conditions. And we'll go ahead and rerun. So this should be showing us a similar outcome. Yes, this number is higher because we also changed the house to liquidate. So actually, just for the purpose of getting a little bit more, a few more failure trials to look at, let's go ahead and disable that. And we'll disable the big surplus milestone just to review the baseline numbers. Once again, we see the original success rate, 94.75%. And if we go ahead now, we can just go up to the milestone section. We can reactivate this milestone. While looking at the net worth, we can also look at expenses. So we see here that we have a few outlier cases with very high expenses. Most of these are most of these expenses are actually related to taxes, but these lower amounts here are probably more typical. So if we go ahead and rerun, we will see the effect of enabling this flexible expense. We see here that the success rate actually did not change, so it did not go down by enabling these this milestone, which enables the additional spending. We do see that, in the final year, and we can also compare this graph here as well, its expenses over time. But just looking at the final year of the plan, we see here average expenses coming down across the board. This is because effectively our net worth is lower on average, and then taxes are therefore lower because of the spending that occurred earlier in the plan due to the bonification. And you can also compare this to net worth. But sorry, just briefly, you'll see that the number of trials in these outliers have reduced slightly, and of course the net worth, in these outliers is mostly what's driving the spending here. Is obviously the taxes on this large amount, whereas which is also the case here as well, since the only real additional spending that we've induced here, discretionary spending, was the additional $25,000 a year on vacations. But what that effectively will do is sort of lower your, lower your net worth on average for these, these cases, the successful cases, but it doesn't increase the number of failure cases, most likely because the threshold for the big surplus milestone is never met. And most likely did not alter the barely made it trials as well. So you can dive into that a little bit more, but the overall success rate was the same. So that's kind of what we're going for here. So this is an example of how you can use milestones that are based on metrics, right? So they're dynamic in nature. And in this case, we actually are relying on 3 different components to this milestone, which are all technically, directly or indirectly dynamic. So retirement date being based on financial independence, which is a metric, which is dynamic, et cetera. So these can be kind of chained together in this way. So hopefully this is a useful example for some advanced milestone usage. So putting it all together, if we want, we can add back the sort of the higher liquid net worth benchmark if we're trying to increase this success rate substantially. I'll also go ahead and re-enable the liquidate home if necessary. So we add that component, and we'll go to chance of success and rerun. And now we see 99.95. So yeah, we have that one almost made it trial. Again, if you're really curious, you can always just bump that up a little bit more, and that most likely will knock that out. And you can play around with it like this. This is just one way to maybe to look at the data. But maybe historical backtesting is and historical data sets in general is not something that you feel fits your situation. So we can also look at using a normal distribution. Let's go ahead and look at how that's configured in ProjectionLab. For any element here under data source, you can choose to select a normal distribution. These are independent. So, for example, we'll go ahead and use the normal distribution for investments and dividends. Again, these are just default values. These shouldn't be taken as recommendations. But we'll go ahead and use the historical U.S. inflation. And for bond returns, we'll use a normal distribution as well. Methodology. In this case, the historical sampling, it says random start years, random restart. So this is actually going to just apply to the inflation component, and we'll stick with the same number of trials, and we'll run that. Given that we've used a fairly conservative metric here for financial independence, and we've based our retirement on financial independence, our numbers are still pretty good here, so not much difference. But let's go back and let's change this to 2026 as it was originally, and let's run that. And now we can compare this to the original plan. Yeah, 97.1. So, and you'll see here too that there is a significantly different distribution, and actually I'll tab over and show the results from the original plan here as well. So here we have in the original, using historical S&P with a random restart. So this in this case we have a large surplus 72% of the time, comfortable 21% of the time. Success rate's pretty close, but a little bit lower in this case. So there's a few more failed cases here as well. If we go ahead and look at net worth, that might be more interesting. And yeah, just to show that again. So the difference here being a much greater shift to sort of the comfortable category compared to the large surplus category, and a lot more, in this case, a lot more sort of cases in the barely beta, which kind of makes sense. So basically, everything's kind of skewed towards the middle here, right? So more cases that were, using the normal distribution method, as opposed to using the historical S&P data. And one more thing about the chance of success feature. If you have defined any accounts where you've specified a custom growth rate, say a fixed growth rate here, and a fixed dividend yield, it is important to note you will see a message under data sources like this. If you have any accounts with custom growth rates, those currently take precedence. So this is a behavior I wanted to point out. In some cases, this may be desirable, but if you want your accounts to be able to vary inside the Monte Carlo simulation, you will need to have your accounts use the plan level growth and dividend settings as shown here. We hope you've enjoyed this video on the chance of success feature. If you have any questions, you can drop them down in the comments or find us on Discord. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching.